Reversing narcissistic abuse. Don't just heal narcissistic abuse trauma, reverse the narcissistic devaluation programming. You have value simply because you exist. Today we are going to be looking into the question of, are you an empath? Are you a super empath? Are you a sympath? Are you a super sympath? Why you need to know the difference between empathy and sympathy. These terms have gotten switched, especially when we're talking about things like empath and super empath. Before I get into that, the whole point of this channel and the whole point of all of the videos that I make is to learn how to reverse the devaluation. So what I want everybody to understand is that the base assumption of this channel is that every single person on planet Earth has been narcissistically devalued. The level of that devaluation can go from the average person who's being devalued every day by having to go to university, go to schools, paying taxes, watching television, learning how to, go to work and throw your energy away every day at work so that you can be given money just to be allowed to survive, being told don't be silly, don't follow your own desires, do what everybody tells you. That's the normal thing that everybody goes through, and they have been narcissistically programmed to live in a devalued state. That's a healthy person. That can go all the way down to the level of the borderline, who's been so horrifically damaged from birth that they're in a constant state of fear and panic and pain, horrific emotional pain. The narcissists themselves, there's no narcissist out there in the world who wasn't first horrifically devalued and abused. So this is the scale. Healthy to completely screwed up. Everybody has been narcissistically devalued. And the main thing, the main base assumption of narcissistic devaluation is the message that you don't deserve to exist. And that's why I keep saying you have value simply because you exist. There is literally nothing you can do that will make you more lovable than you are right now simply because you exist. All of the reactions, all of the abuse that people give to other people is based on their own internal programming that says that they don't have any value. So they have to feed off of you. They have to damage you. And it's a response. So there's no way to be devalued, whether you're just an empath, a codependent, or if you're all the way over to a hardcore narcissist, psychopath. There's no way not to operate from that without having first been convinced that your consciousness isn't enough. But that's what I'm here to tell you. And I'm saying that everybody on that spectrum, whether they're just the average human being who, has to live with the pain of how am I going to be worthy in this world? I'm not rich, I'm not famous, to the hardcore, narcissist abuser who needs to gather people around them and feed off of them for supply, that if every single person along that spectrum was able to understand and be able to embody the knowledge that I have value, I am lovable, I am supremely lovable, simply because I am a conscious being who exists. Because I exist and I experience reality. If everybody could embody that, all pain, all mental illness would disappear. So that's the point of this channel. I'm not trying to talk you out of your therapy. I'm definitely not trying to talk you out of your 12-step work. I'm not trying to talk you out of anything. Along with all of those things, let's reverse the narcissistic devaluation programming. All right, so let's get back to the subject, which is, are you an empath? So let me get to the quote here. Let's see. I want to get to the definition of it, which is where. All right. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Okay, so that's not what I want to do either. I want to look for, not this. I think I want to look for this. All right. So let's look at the definition first. From the dictionary perspective, what is empathy? What is an empath? So the dictionary definition is that empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Sympathy is a similar word, but it means an affinity, an association, or relationship between persons or things wherein whatever affects one similarly affects the other. Okay? So those are the dictionary definitions, and I'm here to tell you that when we talk about the term empath and super empath, these definitions have gotten completely mixed up. So let's take a look at the internet definition, because if somebody's out there calling themselves an empath or a super empath, they're going off the internet definition of all this. And, unfortunately we get into, some friendly disagreements here on this channel when I talk about empathy, and I say that empathy is a choice. Empathy is an action, it's not a feeling. And it's really important. If you want to heal from narcissistic devaluation, you must be willing to understand what I'm trying to tell you. Because if you don't, if you want to believe that empathy is something inborn, so I want you to take stock. Do you want to believe that? Forget about if you do believe it. Do you want to believe that empathy is inborn? If you want to believe that empathy is inborn, it means that you don't feel that you have value to be loved and empathized with. So understand that. So when I say empathy is a choice, I'm saying that I deserve to be loved because of who I am. I don't want to be loved by somebody who can't help themselves. We'll get into why that's a problem. So sit with yourself. Do you fantasize about finding somebody that looks at you from across the room and is overwhelmed with an impulse to love you and take care of you? Do you want to find somebody that can't help but love you, support you, nurture you? I can understand that feeling. Be honest with yourself. Do you have that fantasy? Now, hopefully you're honest with yourself about it. Now put that aside and let's take a look at these terms and how they've been used, and how helpful or unhelpful is it when we start talking about empath and super empath. All right, so the internet definition of empath, and I'm quoting, I didn't make this up, I pulled it straight off of the internet. People who are extremely attuned to the feelings and emotions of others. An emotional empath, again, this comes from the internet. This means you're very sensitive to other people's emotions. If someone you know is happy or angry, you may have those feelings as well. Did you catch that? Now, if you see yourself as an empath or a super empath, does that define you? Let's look at it again. Do you relate to this? Are you an emotional empath, where if someone you know is happy or angry, you may have those feelings as well? Is that your experience? Are you an empath? When you walk in the room, do you become overwhelmed with the feelings of people in the room? If somebody's upset, can you figure out the person who's angry and upset? Can you feel the person who's negative? Can you feel the dangerous people? Can you feel the wounded people? Can you feel the loving people? Are you drawn to people because they're in pain and you want to help them? Is it something you walk into the room and you want to just enjoy yourself, but you can't because you can feel the pain of the person in the corner and you're drawn to them? You have to go and help them. Is this your definition of empath? Be honest. Because according to this is emotional empathy. This means you're very sensitive to other people's emotions. If someone you know is happy or angry, you may have those feelings as well. Let's go down to the intuitive empath. You're so skilled at picking up on the thoughts and emotions of others that your insights seem intuitive. In other words, psychic. So do you have the psychic ability when you walk in the room, you know what other people are thinking and feeling? Are you a lie detector? Can you tell if somebody is a liar? Can you tell if they have evil intentions? Can you tell if somebody's loving and kind? Or do you have the psychic intuitive ability? According to the internet, you are an intuitive empath. You're so skilled at picking up on the thoughts and emotions of others that your insights seem intuitive. Let's take a look at some definitions. Again, I'm just picking this up directly from the internet. So, what is an empath and how do you know if you are one? A person who is highly attuned to the energies and emotions of those around them may be considered an empath. Empaths are said to feel what others are feeling so deeply that they absorb or take on the emotions themselves, often at the expense of their own emotional well-being. Is this you? That's what I was saying. You walk in the room and you can't help but feel other people's feelings. You can't help but take them on. Is it overwhelming you to the point that it is detrimental to your health? Does your nervous system get affected by it? According to the internet, you are an empath. Let's see, what else? Here's another one. What is an empath and how do you know if you are one? Again, I'm just pulling this off the internet. An empath takes on the feelings of others and can relate to what someone else may be feeling, whether that's emotionally or physically. And while being an empath can mean you are a caring, thoughtful person, it can also be overwhelming and leave you with little or no time for yourself. This is a doctor. I don't know what she's a doctor of. A physical doctor, I think a doctor of medicine. Okay, so this is a doctor. Somebody went, so you go to a doctor and you know, it's a doctor by their name, you're going to expect that they know what they're talking about. So does this describe you? Be honest. Let's take a look again at the actual dictionary definition. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Sympathy, an affinity, association, or relationship between persons or things wherein whatever affects one similarly affects the other. So going off of that, people are using the word empathy all wrong and empath all wrong. Because according to the internet, an empath, you can read it right here, is somebody who can't help but feel, be overwhelmed, be pulled into, and have the same feelings as other people in the room. That is not empathy, that is sympathy. Let's also be clear, it means that you don't have any conscious control over this. So it's, you know, people who call themselves empaths and super empaths, they tend to take this as a badge of honor, you know. So here's the assumption behind all of this. The assumption behind all of this, and I want you to understand this, because if you can understand this, you can heal yourself of the devaluation program. Remember, the whole point of this is not to be right and throw out my opinions. The whole point of this is to reorchestrate our understanding and our self-care so that we can reverse the devaluation programming. And what is devaluation programming? The core of it is that you are not lovable and that your existence is not enough. You must do something other than just exist in order to be valuable. In the case of the empath, the person who wears as a badge of honor that they're an empath or a super empath, they are saying that their empathic ability is what gives them value. They'll even say, I love everybody. I take care of everybody. I'm a good person. I'm not like those evil borderlines or those evil, actually I meant to say narcissists, because borderlines are empaths, highly empathic. The empath, the borderline, will also say, I am not like those narcissists. I have empathy, meaning that I take on other people's feelings. I feel intensely for other people. When I see sadness, when I hear about painful things, when I hear about animals being abused, I am overwhelmed with sadness and feelings of love and nurturing for them. I cry. It's very damaging to me. It's overwhelming to me. Well, the underlying assumption of that is that you're not in control of that. That is an impulse that overwhelms you. So you are taking a badge of honor. You are wanting to be lauded and approved of for something you can't help. It makes it no different than needing to fart or poop or piss. These are things that you have to do. If you don't do them, it's very bad for you. You can't. Who wants to take credit for something, an impulse that they don't have any control over? So if you walk in the room and you are overwhelmed by other people's emotions, you want to say that's an ability. Maybe it is. It's a gift. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But the fact of the matter is that it's not a conscious decision on your part. You don't have any control over it. Now let's go a step further. I want you to be honest with yourself here. Because if you're willing to put down your defenses and be honest with yourself, I can help you heal. I don't care where you are on this spectrum. Again, I'm not telling you to stop going to therapy. I'm not telling you to stop working the 12 steps. I'm not telling you to stop doing anything that's empowering to you. We're going even deeper. Because again, the main program, the evaluation programming, says you don't have value in and of yourself. That your value is what you bring to other people. You don't have value simply because you exist. But the truth is, your overwhelming value is simply because you exist. You have consciousness, you experience reality. That makes you more valuable than anything. So if you get your value based on being an empath, it means that you get your value based on what you do for others. And now when we look at it, you don't have any control over this. So you get your value over something you don't even have any control over. It happens whether you like it or not. You don't want it to happen, and it still happens. So how do you get value from that? If your value is on what you do for others, you're not doing anything. You're just simply responding to an impulse. So there's no difference between responding to a positive impulse, the overwhelming impulse to be loving. You can't stop yourself, so you do it. The overwhelming impulse to feel other people's feelings, you can't help it. There's no different than the impulse to push people away, to attack, to abuse. Same thing. Evil, horrible psychopaths have an impulse to be abusive. The only difference is that from your perspective, your overwhelming impulse to love people is good for them. And the overwhelming impulse of somebody to devalue or harm them is bad for them. We can debate whether that's true or not. But even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact you can't take any credit for your impulse. It's no different than the other person. They can't take any credit for their impulse. They can't stop themselves. So if you can't stop yourself from having all of these overwhelming feelings, how is it that you can take credit? Now I know I've just kind of devalued you and I've taken away your protective mechanism. It's a defense mechanism. I have value because I'm overwhelmed with these loving feelings. Now I'm a good person. Why? Because I'm overwhelmed. This is the borderline's response when they say, I'm not an evil person. I can't help the fact. In fact, I have too much empathy. That's why I respond in all these negative ways, which of course, if you think about it, because that doesn't really make any sense, does it? But that's their experience. They're overwhelmed with these incredibly empathic emotions to the point where it's damaging to them, and then they pull back and they defend themselves. They don't have any control over that either. So again, when it comes to the borderline, they have no problem saying, I'm not a bad person, I'm filled with all these wonderful emotions. In fact, I have too much empathy. And then you say, well, then why did you choose to turn it off and be so abusive? Well, that's because I can't help myself. So either way, it's all the same. So let's look again at the definition of empathy. The ability to understand and share the feelings of others. That is not the same as sympathy, which is a relationship between persons or things wherein whatever affects one similarly affects the other. So we're using this all wrong. People talk about having empathy, being an empath, being a super empath, when really what they should be saying is that they're a sympath. And, so again, I wanted to ask you if you have a fantasy. And I've had this fantasy. This is how I know that people have this fantasy. I've had this fantasy before. And that fantasy is, do you fantasize about finding somebody who, when they look at you from across the room, they are overwhelmed with a desire to connect with you, that they feel this impulse to go to you, to connect with you, to see you for who you truly are, that they see the essence of you, the beauty of you, and they are overwhelmed with love, attraction, connection. Do you fantasize about being with somebody who says, I feel like I've known you for many lifetimes. It's like I know what you're thinking before you think it. Do you fantasize about being with somebody that says, I just can't help myself. I have to take care of you. I have to love you. You're so beautiful. You're so amazing. From the moment that I saw you, I knew that you were the one. Do you fantasize about this? Love at first sight. Do you fantasize about this? Well, what that means, and let me, look, this happens all the time, and just because this part happens doesn't mean it's going to be a bad relationship. It's part of, the way we're wired to do this for all kinds of reasons. But if this is your fantasy of what you want to have, and it's your overwhelming fantasy, the underlying assumption is that you don't have value in and of yourself. That if somebody took the time to get to know you, they wouldn't feel this way. So you want them to have that feeling instantly. Who does have these feelings? Babies, puppies, dogs, cats. They, especially puppies. They look at you, and if you give them any positive attention, they love you. They can't help but love you. They follow you everywhere. Dogs the same. If they bond to you, they never leave you. You can throw them in a trunk. You can beat them with a horsewhip. They will always love you. Nothing will break their ability to bond with you and love you forever. This is why people love having dogs around, because dogs love you no matter what. This is why, when you walk around, you want to go out and pet somebody's dog, because the dog says, I just met you and I love you. It means that you don't have to go through that whole thing of, if they find out who I am, are they going to love me? So do you have the feeling that if somebody were to see you for who you really are, do you have a fear that they won't love you? So the need to be loved impulsively, for somebody to impulsively love you, is because you want to feel like you have some control over them. Because you're afraid that you're not lovable, you're not good enough. How do I know? Because I've had these feelings. I know exactly what that feels like. And there's a difference between fantasizing about that and fantasizing about meeting somebody who doesn't know you, who you spend time with, and they get to know you, they become your friend, and the more they get to know you, the more they love you because of who you are. The more they get to know how you treat them, they can learn to predict that you are going to be loving, you're going to be kind. Here's one for me. I learned this a long time ago. Like, if I can be with a woman, for example, who can sit across from me and say, I'm really angry at you right now, and be able to talk about her feelings in a way that helps us to resolve it and come closer, I'll marry that person. Not just somebody who says when they first see me that, oh my God, you're so amazing. I feel like you're an angel that came out of the sky. I've always known you for millions of years and we're meant to be together. That person you want to stay away from, because they're just as easily going to flip in the other direction, aka the borderline. That's exactly what borderlines do. So if you fantasize about somebody loving you right off the bat, unconditionally and impulsively, it means that you don't believe that you're lovable in and of yourself. That's okay. You've been narcissistically devalued. You have been programmed by the third dimensional earth that we live on, by the society that we live on. You've been programmed to believe that you don't have value in and of yourself. And that is what we are trying to accomplish here. So I wanted to respond to a couple of quotes about empathy, because I love it when people leave comments on the channel, because it gives me a lot to look at. So let's see. Here's the first one. Empathy is not a defense system kicking in, reacting to perceived abandonment. Empathy is not hypervigilance, reading the other person so you know how to love bomb and devalue them unconsciously. Now, I never said that empathy was that. I'm saying that people who use the word empathy, who call themselves super empaths, they use empathy this way, and that it is actually sympathy. It is an inability to stop oneself. It's not something that you use as a badge of honor. And an empathic person is not what is being described. So let's look at, here's somebody who claims to be a super empath. I'm not giving out the names of people because I'm not trying to, make anybody feel bad. But, I can't explain it any better than the people who actually believe that they are super empaths. So here's somebody who thinks they're a super empath. A super empath wouldn't end up with a sympathy impaired person. By the way, I went looking for that. I couldn't find any such definition. So this is, I don't know where this definition comes from, but it's not a psychological definition. A sympathy impaired person. So in other words, a super empath wouldn't end up with an asshole. Because that's all you're saying. Somebody who isn't able to sympathize with your feelings, obviously they've got a problem, and at the very least they're sociopath or a psychopath. According to them, an empath might, but not a super empath. So a super empath would never end up with a sympathy impaired person. And now let's just fact check that for a second. How many super empaths watching this have never been in an abusive relationship? What's that? None of you? How many people who claim to be super empaths have been in one or more extremely destructive, narcissistically abusive relationship? Calm down. All of you. Okay, I'll sit down. You can all put your hands down. So that is just complete. It's just not true. This person is saying this. So what you're reading here is somebody's defense mechanism fantasy. By the way, this is exactly how borderlines think. And again, the whole point of that is that borderlines suffer from a mental illness, a personality disorder that at times prevents them from seeing objective reality truthfully, because they have a defense mechanism. So this is a fantasy. This is a narcissistic, grandiose fantasy. That's why they're a super empath. Not just an empath, but a super empath. What does super mean? It means superior. It means above. You got a cape. It's a superhero. It's a super ability. Makes you a superhero. So a super empath wouldn't end up with a sympathy impaired person. We already know that's not true. And an empath might, but a super empath wouldn't. And this person says super empath equals borderline personality disorder. I don't know this person. I didn't ask, but so this is probably somebody with BPD. Maybe I'm wrong, but this person is saying that being a super empath is a great thing. And I know from personal experience they're saying, and then they're saying it means, a super empath is a borderline. So this person is saying having borderline personality disorders is really that I have this super ability, and it just goes so far sometimes that it, I don't know, gets you in trouble? I don't know. So a super empath, according to them, which is a borderline. So let's just take the word super empath and replace it with borderline. A borderline wouldn't end up with a sympathy impaired person. Fact check that. No, borderlines are extremely attracted to narcissists. An empath might, but not a borderline. So this person is saying that borderlines are superior to your average empath. And a borderline strengths include, but are not limited to, strong will, enhanced courage, unbreakable determination, mental strength, and insight. Insight is a real thing. I have it. It allows one to detect lies and manipulation. In my case, anyway, I can detect cluster Bs fairly quickly. I can avoid being manipulated by a-holes as long as my boundaries are good. If the borderline doesn't learn to regulate emotional flashbacks and have boundaries, they are in trouble. All right, so I have to assume this is a borderline. Otherwise, why would they talk with such a surety about that? But again, let's fact check it. And what is a borderline? According to this, a borderline is of somebody with a super ability, like a superhero, that is this fact-checking machine and knows everything about everybody, has this unbreakable will, has this ability to catch people in lies, and would never allow themselves to get involved with somebody who doesn't have the ability to align themselves emotionally with you, a sympathy impaired person. Let's fact check it. Super empath strengths include, but are not limited to, so it could even be more than this, strong will. So if a borderline has a strong will, why is it that why are they unable to stop themselves from splitting and abandoning people that love them? So right there, that's a problem. They have enhanced courage. So if you're so brave, then why is it when the moment that you feel afraid, you're out the door? Unbreakable determination. Well, if by unbreakable determination you mean an inability to work against your impulses, because when you have an impulse to devalue, to destroy, to gaslight, to discard, nothing will stop you. And nobody can talk you out of having that paranoid delusion that somebody's out to destroy you. You try and talk them out of it, then all you do is you call them a narcissist and you gaslight them. Or you accuse them of gaslighting you. If that's what you mean by unbreakable determination, means that you're incredibly stubborn and intractable and inflexible, even when you're wrong. By the way, I've heard from borderlines numerous times who say that they sometimes will sit back and watch themselves as they're discarding somebody, and they know that the actions that are being taken aren't accurate, and they can't stop themselves. And it's like they're watching themselves do it. They also have said that the feeling that they get, the rush that they get when they are devaluing, destroying, and discarding somebody that loves them, that is such an intoxicating feeling that they can't break away from it, that they have to follow through, even when they know that what they're doing is inaccurate or destructive. So if you want to call that unbreakable determination, that's one way of looking at it. Mental strength. I'm not even going to go there. Somebody with mental illness is talking about having mental strength. And insight. Insight is a real thing. I agree. So what this other person was saying here, it was responding to that I was saying that people who claim to have empathy in this super empath way, that really that hyper ability, that psychic ability to know what somebody is thinking and feeling is actually a defense mechanism. And it comes from when you were a child and you were being abused to such a degree that you had to know your narcissistic abuser, what they were thinking and feeling, and try and get ahead of that so that you wouldn't get punished. You grow up, you get rewarded for that like half the time. You know, if your narcissistic dad is wanting to have a cup of coffee and you pick up on that and you go make him a cup of coffee and bring it to him before he says anything, he's going to go, good for you. You're a good boy or good girl. If you do what they want, when they're in a good mood, they will reward you for that. So again, you get told the narcissistic devaluating programming, which says your value comes from meeting other people's desires, not from the fact that you exist. So I'm saying that it is hypervigilance. This person goes on to say that empathy is not hypervigilance, reading the other person so you know how to love bomb or devalue them. Well, love bomb and devaluing them is something that is done, but it's a judgment. When you are, as a little kid, meeting the needs of your parents who are abusive in order not to get beat up, you could call that love bombing, but it's really survival. When you do it as an adult to somebody that's not your parental abuser, and you're doing it to show them that you are indispensable to them so that they will love you and take care of you, that's love bombing. But it comes from the same hypervigilance. So the thing about being an adult and being a child is children can't help it. They have to survive. They're being trained to do that. As an adult, you're not being trained to do that, but because you're still wrapped up in that, because your unconscious is still playing out that dynamic, you seek out that dynamic everywhere you go. And in fact, you try and take people and put them in that dynamic. That's what love bombing is. Love bombing, whether it's done by a borderline or a codependent, codependents love bomb also. Meaning a codependent who doesn't have a personality disorder, or whether it's a narcissist. Love bombing is grooming you. It's trying to pull you into a dynamic that you might not be a part of. You might just be a normal person, maybe with some codependent tendencies, because nobody ends up with borderlines or narcissists unless you have codependent tendencies. But you're not in that dynamic, but you have to be programmed into it. So love bombing is a way of programming you to be, number one, to be a child, because love bombing is the type of overwhelming attention and love that mothers give to babies. So the only people who respond positively to that are codependents, borderlines, and narcissists. And they respond to it because they were never given that as babies. So when they're given that as an adult, if you have that wound in there, it opens up and you conflate that with love. And you go, oh my God, this person is so loving. I know, I've been there. I'm not talking out of school. I've been there. I know exactly what it feels like. Oh my God, nobody's ever loved me like this before. This person is the most loving person I've ever experienced. No, this person is trying to infantilize you so that you will become bonded to them. The same way you want your puppy to get bonded to you and love you unconditionally no matter what. Comes from the need just to be loved. So that is love bombing. But the hypervigilance that starts it out, which is being able to detect everything that you need, all of your desires, all of your wants. My borderline said to me when we first started going out, I want to be your ultimate fantasy. Now, I didn't know that BPD existed. And I went, oh my God, really? That's awesome. I totally scored. No, I didn't score. Underneath that was, I want to conform myself to be your ultimate fantasy so that you will love me and that you will actually need me. And then I'll have control over you and you won't hurt me. You won't leave me. So yes, empathy is none of those things. Empathy is a choice. Empathy, again, let's look at the definition. Actually, let's look at the definition of hypervigilance. Hypervigilance, codependency, how hypervigilance turns to victimhood in a never-ending cycle. So I have to blow this up so I can see it. All right, so codependents show and exhibit many common symptoms. One of these, and one that I see often with clients, I don't know who this is, I just pulled this off the internet, is hypervigilance. Not in the sense of physical threat, mostly to do with observing a partner's behavior for signs of change. For codependents who constantly live with insecurity, these signs could mean a lot. By the way, borderlines and narcissists are codependents. Codependent, it's not codependent or abuser. Everybody in this triangle, if you're the codependent, the non-disordered codependent who's being abused, or if you're the abuser, you're all codependents. Codependent, I'll give you another definition of codependent. Codependent is being narcissistically devalued. A codependent is somebody who chronically feels that their value comes from what they do, not who they are. So anybody is a codependent, and to be a codependent by definition means that you have hypervigilance to some degree. You're trying to figure out what somebody else is thinking and feeling so you can fix them so that you can get rid of your own discomfort, number one, and number two, so that they will love you and they will accept you and give you value. Say, you're a good person, you took care of my needs, you're a good person, I love you, I'm not going to discard you. So if you haven't picked up by now, this is a spectrum. It's not a seesaw. It's not codependence on one side and abusers on the other. It is a spectrum. And it is a spectrum of narcissistic devaluation. You could call it narcissism. To be a codependent is to have narcissistic devaluation. To be a psychopathic serial killer is to have narcissistic devaluation. It all comes from not being good enough. And on the far end, it's gone so far that it's damaged the person so badly that their defense mechanisms are so intense, they end up killing or destroying people. On the other end, you have the perpetual victim who's desperately trying to overcome their childhood devaluation and finally feel lovable and accepted. You get it? It's a spectrum. Whether it's codependence or whether it's full-blown personality disorder. So, codependents show and exhibit many common symptoms. One of these that I see often with clients is hypervigilance, not in the sense of physical threat, but mostly to do with observing a partner's behavior for signs of change. For codependents who constantly live with insecurity, these signs could mean a lot. Many clients who have noticed this element in themselves take any perceived change as a possible signal that they are about to be abandoned. Sound like a borderline? In reality, there is usually nothing to be worried about, or there is an issue that is not much to do with the relationship. What it does to a codependent is to foster an attitude of treading on eggshells. They feel that the only way to gain the reassurance they need is to constantly question their partner. What are they thinking? Why are they moody? What did I do? These questions are all designed to bring the relationship back to a safe place for the codependent, and so under their control. I'm going to repeat that. These questions are all designed to bring the relationship back to a safe place for the codependent, and so under their control. If reassurance is not forthcoming, it often leads to typical scenarios that include rage, silent treatment, and victimhood. It leaves the partner under scrutiny and wary of anything that could kick off the cycle. In effect, both are hypervigilant. So this individual, where is it? So this individual is wrong. Again, they're calling empathy. What I'm saying, what the internet definition of empathy is being sympathetic, unable to control your ability to know other people's feelings, your constant desire to hone in and figure out. And what does the borderline say? The borderline says, I have a magical power to tell lies. I'm a lie detector. I'm a walking lie detector. Codependents say this as well. Again, borderlines are the extreme. People have said that borderlines are failed narcissists. Narcissists are people who've been devalued to such a degree that they create this firewall, and then they create a false fantasy, godlike identity that they then present themselves as. They're not that person. They present themselves that way so that they won't be seen as this horrible person deserving of destruction. So a borderline is said to be a failed narcissist because they weren't capable of creating that firewall, and so they're a vulnerable narcissist, which means that they're highly emotional, highly empathic, not like a narcissist who, again, we're talking about the generalization. Not all narcissists are this way. But the generalization of the narcissist who's the evil genius who knows what's going on with you, like what was that, Silence of the Lamb guy? That's a codependent fantasy, by the way. This is why these movies are so popular, because people want to be this person who can figure you out and know everything that's wrong with you and not be emotionally attached and be able to slice you to pieces and you can't touch me. So the borderline wants this. They can't do it. So they're extremely vulnerable in the beginning, and they attach, like a codependent. They are codependent very strongly, but they have that psychopathic narcissist inside of them. When their strategy to create love and intimacy, which is their strategy, the borderline strategy is that I'm going to create an intimacy and I'm going to have love for the rest of my life. They're not looking to hurt anybody in the beginning. They want to be loved. But because they were incapable of protecting themselves from the overwhelming fear of being abandoned, then when that kicks in, which is if you've been on the other end of that, you're not, everything is wonderful. You're being wonderful to them. You might even be giving them, in the midst of giving them a ring or a wedding ring or a promise ring or something like that, the ultimate symbol of love and commitment and safety. That triggers their fear of abandonment to such a degree that they lose control and the inner psychopath comes out. That's the person that, again, they look at from a distance and they see this psychopath. They hear their own voice, they see their body moving, but it's not them. It's this inner protector, this inner psychopath that is devaluing, destroying. Or if they completely dissociate, they won't even remember that it happened. And you'll point it out to them next day. And you'll say, you did this to me. And they go, I never did that. It's because it wasn't them. It was their inner narcissist, their inner malignant psychopathic narcissist that waits until the person is about to be, or the borderline feels that they're about to be made very vulnerable. They really start to attach and really have real love. The psychopath comes out and destroys it in the attempt to protect them. So this is what people are talking. This is why all borderlines think they're super empaths. It's a defense mechanism. It's a grandiose fantasy. That's what they want to believe. They want to believe that every person that they've discarded, every person that they've devalued and destroyed, came from their superpower ability. That I know what you were really doing. I remember my borderline said to me once, I know what you're doing. I'm like, what are you talking about? I know what you're planning. You're planning to make me insane. You're going to put me in an insane asylum. Really? Is that why I just spent $3,000 on a computer for you so I can put you in an insane asylum? Anyway. So, anyway, we could go on and on and on and on and on. But again, let's take a look at the dictionary definition. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. An ability to understand and share feelings. That is a lot different from sympathy, which says an affinity, association, or relationship between persons or things wherein whatever affects one similarly affects the other. In other words, you can't help yourself. Let's again look at the emotional empath. This means you're very sensitive to other people's emotions. If someone you know is happy or angry, you may have these feelings as well because they have them. You don't have any control over it. It's an impulse. Again, this is hypervigilance. This is something that was created in infancy so that you would be able to survive. And it means that you are in a state of intense trauma. It's a form of PTSD. So being a super empath is somebody who suffers from tremendous post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? Because empathy, true empathy, is the ability. It's not the impulse. It's not the overwhelming impulse that you can't stop. I can't help but have all these people's feelings. That's sympathy. Empathy is the ability. When you decide to, you can go, I wonder how that makes that person feel. Oh, that would make them feel like this. That would make them feel like that. That's why I say borderlines don't have empathy. And they get really upset because they have a lot of feelings, intense feelings, including feelings of love, feelings of protection, feelings of sadness, feelings of wanting to reach out and love others, but they don't have any control over it, and they can shut it off and go in the opposite direction at the drop of a hat. That's not empathy. Empathy is the ability to actually understand what somebody's feeling. And I say, with the qualifier, even when you're angry, even when you're frightened, even when it's inconvenient. So when you get angry, or you get frightened, or it's inconvenient, and if that gives you the justification to not have the ability to understand their feelings, it means you don't have empathy, because empathy is the ability to understand where people are at from wherever you are. You're happy, you have good feelings for them, great. You're unhappy with them, you can still know what's harmful to them. This is what makes a good parent. When you're a parent and your child is having a temper tantrum and screaming, you pick them up and you hug them. What do bad parents do? They slap them. I'll give you something to cry about. Right? So empathy is the ability to understand somebody's feelings even if you don't personally have those feelings. Sympathy is you have the same feelings as somebody else. And this is what people are talking about. Anyway, we could go on and on and on and on about this, but let's take a look again. What is narcissistic? And again, all of this, whether you are a super empath, an empath, a sympath, whether you're a borderline, a narcissist, just your run-of-the-mill innocent codependent, no matter where you are on the scale, the point is that you have been narcissistically programmed to devalue yourself. Whether you're, again, the innocent codependent victim, or whether you're the abuser, or wherever you are on that scale. So let's take a look at what causes narcissistic devaluation. So NDP is the unconscious assumption downloaded into every 3D human from birth. NDP's main assumption is based on external arbitrary attributes or actions. NDP does not allow for human consciousness to have inherent worth. For your value is based on how much narcissistic supply you can deliver to the 3D earth. So, the thing about narcissists, if you really want to know the difference between a narcissist and a borderline and just your regular codependent, the narcissist is somebody who doesn't always have to be a malignant, evil genius. There are things like communal narcissists, which are actually filled with empathy, filled with sympathy, filled with love. In fact, they volunteer, and they're pillars of society, but they can be a narcissist in that eventually it may take decades before it starts to come out. Years or decades. At some point you find out you are fuel. They are feeding off of you. that they don't have value in and of themselves, so they have to feed off of you. So NDP Earth demands number 5, you deny your personal desires in favor of NDP consensus. In other words, you don't go after what gives you joy and happiness and power. You go after what, that's what they say, what communism is, you don't have any value, only your value to the state. During all of the, they were saying, we can do this. This isn't about you. You have to protect other people. That's a complete shift of, the whole point of the universe is that your value, your happiness comes first. And the difference between that and narcissism is that the narcissist gets happiness from you in spite of you. Whereas the individuated person doesn't need anything outside of them to make them happy. They're able to empower and make themselves happy. And when they do that, every other being in the universe also gets empowered. If you're a musician and you play music and that empowers you, you're not harming anybody by focusing on making yourself happy. Your parents might tell you you're wasting your time, you need to become, a bricklayer like we are, or and then they'll devalue you out of what you love. But that doesn't change the fact that that's their narcissistic devaluation. And you being told going after what makes you happy harms other people. That's a lie. You're not getting your value from other people. You're not taking it. You're not feeding off of them. You are finding it within yourself. Number 6, individuals who value consciousness over materialism are eliminated from the society. The goal of NDP is to create a global Ponzi scheme fueled by global slavery. The only way to reverse NDP is creating a new reality through quantum shifting. I'm talking about that on my other channel. You can go to thunderwizard.com. I'm creating, you can get the quantum shifting video courses there. I just created number 3, which is a very powerful meditation. If you want to learn more about how to reverse the narcissistic devaluation programming, you can go here to reversenarcabuse.com. I've got an introductory video. These are all going to expand into much deeper teachings and concepts, but it's important that you get the basics. So I want to be clear. This channel is for everybody. It used to be just for people who'd been abused by borderlines. That's why I talk about it a lot, because I went through it. But I recognize that people with NDP, people with BPD, people with cluster B personality disorders, the average codependent who's been horrifically damaged, the super empath, the empath, I don't care what you want to call yourself, the average person, all of us have been devalued, and all of us are having our energy being sucked out of us and pulled out of us and consumed by a society that is a narcissistic devaluer. But we have to go beyond just what's going on, which is going on to YouTube and talking about how horrible borderlines are and narcissists are, or and wanting to tell ourselves we're a super empath. We need to go beyond all that. We need to even go beyond the modalities that work, like some therapy. There's some therapy that works, like the 12 steps, which absolutely heal you from the trauma and get you to a place of healing where you can start to operate from yourself. But we need to go further than that. We need to go deeper and further. And that is what I'm doing here. I've been doing this for over 40 years. I've been doing this work and been in recovery for over 40 years. I can teach you how to get to the root of this and to heal from it. And so, again, subscribing to this channel and being a part of it is real helpful. ReverseNarcAbuse.com. That's a good place to start. The Patreon channel for this channel I'll work on later. For right now, let's just get people up and running. So ReverseNarcAbuse.com. And if you want to get started with quantum shifting, which is, trust me, we're going to get into ways that you can go faster in healing and far beyond anything that has ever been released to the world so far. To be able to shift quantumly, to recreate your past, to recreate your programming instantly, where you operate from this place of you know that you have value, you feel it, you're aware of it. You operate from knowing that you have value and you are loved simply because you exist. All right, so go to thunderwizard.com for that, reversenarcabuse.com. Subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys later. Please take very good care of yourselves. Thank you so much for showing up.